Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. The passing out parade of the first batch of Agniveers was held on Tuesday at INS Chilka. It was a first of its kind ceremony to be held post-sunset, marking the completion of training of around 2,600 Agniveers, which include 273 women. The batch includes those who were part of the Indian Navy Republic Day parade at the Kartavya Path on 26th of January this year. Now, these Agniveers underwent 16 weeks of training at INS Chilka, which is the premier training establishment for sailors, training upon induction. What did their training include? Upon successful completion of their training, now where will they be deployed? Also, what the Agniveers can do after their 4-year stint in the Indian Armed Forces. All this and much more in perspective today with three distinguished guests who are joining me on the program. I'm pleased to have with us in the studio Commodore Ranjit B Rai, former Director, Naval Operations and Intelligence and Defense Advisor, Southeast Asia. Commodore, thank you for your time. Welcome to the program. Senior journalist, Mr. Ajay Banerjee. He's a senior defense journalist. And joining us virtually is Air Vice Marshal P.K. Srivastav, retired. He's currently a defense expert. AVM, thank you for your time as well. Welcome to the program. Commodore, allow me to begin the program today with you. And first, let me get your remarks on how significant, how special a day is it for the Indian Navy, which gets its first batch of Agniveers?
Well, it's a new chapter for the Indian Navy. Well, as you know, a little bit of background of the Agnipath program. It came into being in 2022. There were many reasons for it. The large pension scheme, the large retirement benefits which were given. So there was a combined thinking, and Agniveer project called the Agnipath came into being. Fire warrior is an Agniveer. So I'm very happy that today a passing out parade will take place at Chilka. Earlier, Navy training used to be in INS Sarkars in Vishakhapatnam. Then it shifted to this beautiful lake. Very easy to do training on the lake, boat work, seamanship, everything that happens at sea. So here you are, I think 273 women trainees out of the 1,600 trainees which will be passing out. And they will be then sent to possibly the specialist schools, because the age is of 17 to 23. And I'm sure the divisional officers there would have sorted out who is good for what, because we have the specialization in the Navy, the gunnery, the TAS, the navigation. Some will go to the aviation branch, some will be the technical branch. So sort of Hindi mein bolenge, chant diya hota, कि कहल कहाँ जाएगा, and they will be given. But this is the first part of training out of 4 years, and they've already started getting their salary of 30,000 rupees a month, of course deduction of taxes, etc. So I'm sure they're looking forward to the future training. A red letter day for the Indian Navy, passing out parade at INS Chilka for the first batch of Agniveers, of which 273 are women.
All the more inclusive, Mr. Banerjee, because there are 273 women, to be precise, among the first batch of Agniveers. What makes it even more special this time is the unique timing. What is the significance of the POP, which happening in post-sunset, which usually takes place in the mornings? This time, it's taking place post-sunset?
See, first of all, to address your question, the timing of the parade is very unique, as it is happening in the evening, or it has happened in the evening. Probably, I reckon they speak of summer in Odisha or something. They have kept it in the evening.
Okay.
Chilka is in Odisha, so the eastern side is already facing a summer. Possibly that, or possibly a new thing they are trying out that have it in comfortable climes. And also, I want to address this issue of Agniveers. And as you asked, Commodore, also, where will these people go after 4 years? These 2,600 Agniveers of the Navy. Tomorrow, a similar number will come in the IAF and a bigger number in the Indian Army. See, keep in mind this, as I see telescopically, that these people will be well trained in various crafts of the handling of the machines, the warships, the engines, the aero engines, and the engineering part, and also the gunnery part. The growing private sector, private defense manufacturing sector in India, needs trained hands. So these people have great employment opportunities in the private sector, which is growing at a great pace. I'll just give a small little example. L&T, a private shipyard, has won a contract to maintain US warships. Now you need trained people. Where to get these trained people who have already worked in the Navy or the Coast Guard? So now the Navy, I'm giving the example of Navy at the moment, because the Navy is training, becoming out of the first batch. These people will also go into several other places. The Ministry of Home Affairs has also reserved 10% of seats in the various paramilitaries. There is also a reservation in some states which have offered. The Navy will retain 25% of these people into their own lot. That means out of 2,600, these people will retain, 25% will retain. The rest will go out in the reserved seats by the MHA. And I see a big opportunity for them in the private sector as our defense manufacturing sector is growing.
Right. But how do we make them more skilled in terms of, getting into the civilian jobs is something that we will come and discuss in the course of the program. But AVM, Srivastav, coming to you for your thoughts on the significance of this day-to-day, as I asked Commodore as well. And the other question being about the deployment after they now complete their training. What kind of training have they also undergone during this 6-week period? How is it different from the other previous trainings that have happened? And also, when we talk about deployment, will it also cover the frontline warships? Will they be deployed there as well?
See, Tina, this training, which is of 16 weeks, I presume this training is primarily focused on making them military personnel. That means they become now from civilian, they become military, don't know what are the norms, how we operate, what are the standard operating procedures, how they are going to get mingled with the rest of the armed forces personnel. So that is one part. As Commodore has rightly pointed out, then they'll go to job-specific training. And that training is different than what the training is here. Now they know what to do, and when they have job-specific training, then they'll be deployed on the job. There has been a great debate about this scheme, but if you really ask me, it's a momentous occasion for the country. Not only we are meeting the requirements of private sector indirectly through this scheme, as Ajay has pointed out, we are also providing very disciplined, motivated, inspired set of young men and women into the industry. Of course, there are a lot of reservations for them in paramilitary forces, and as from Mahindra Group, there was a kind of call given to all these people that we are there to employ you. That means a lot of people are getting interested. And as we activate our second arm of defense manufacturing, that is the private sector, where there's an emphasis in terms of Atmanirbharta, I think and I can imagine they are going to be very, very helpful, because you'll have young people coming out who have the flavor of all the combat equipment and then can be deployed and trained as per the requirement. Right. That is first part of the thing. Second part is that this kind of input will be available to the nation on a routine basis. That means only 25% will be absorbed in the services. Rest will be available in the market. It's a huge national training. If you see from that perspective, we are training our youth into being a disciplined and very, very meaningful force. That is one point. Secondly, when you get trained in the armed forces, I know where they'll be deployed. Your direct question was that. As far as aero engine is concerned, which was presented by Ajay, I would say there are two tiers in our kind of working. We have somebody who acts as a fitter, a main specialist, and then there's somebody who assists him. I guess that they will go in the assisting role, that they'll be under the charge of a person who's already well-versed, trained, and they'll be helping him. You need such people in large numbers, Tina. I have been there, and I have been in manufacturing, in private sector, I have been there as an engineer. I know there's a huge requirement. And that requirement, we used to struggle with how to promote each one of them. It used to be very, very horrendous, because they're all good people. Then you need to make selections. And in armed forces, these selections are very steep. So even best ones used to get left out, whether it's in the officers cadre or it is in the men cadre. So now this scheme is going to fulfill that ambition also. When they go out, I'm pretty sure it happens in most of the developed countries also. After their shortest stint here, they have been put into that kind of military mindset. And also they have been trained on the job for the equipment which fights the war for you and the national defense structure. So this is going to be very, very important for the country. And I'm sure this is going to initiate something or trigger something which all of us have not seen. So in my opinion, this is one of those great momentous occasions which has happened. Of course, we have seen the controversy and the controversial phase also. I have come on Sansad TV and being their views.
Absolutely. We've discussed about all the concerns, all the controversies, and we've seen how it's been also restructured, about which
I'm making a daring to make a guess and daring to say make a prediction it is going to be one of the best things which has happened to our country.
Some of the concerns still persist, but what are the kind of changes that it is going to trigger, how it's going to be a game changer? It is something that will come to you, Commodore, in just a bit. But to understand more on the role of women, AVM spoke about how there are increased opportunities. What I'm interested and more enthused about knowing is, will we see these women Agniveers also performing greater roles?
To first tell your viewers, first of all, for the past 30 years, women have been taken as officers in the Indian Army, the Air Force and the Navy. Army started taking in women in the other ranks, in the military police, around a year and a half ago. This is the first time women will be taken into what is called operational roles. Now they will be, as Commodore and AVM have pointed out, they will be picked out for task-specific roles. They will be treated as any other sailor. There is no differentiation in the military between a woman and a man sailor. The tasks will be the same. There is only the thing will be that on warships, the Navy has already provided separate women accommodation and separate women personal areas. Otherwise, both men and women Agniveers will be treated the same. They will enjoy the same facilities and have to do the same work. First of the importance is the woman will be going possibly on frontline duties, probably sailing in a ship, probably doing some frontline work as a other rank. Officers are doing for the past 30 years. This is the change, Tina.
Right. Commodore, in terms of strengthening our armed forces, how do you think this scheme will be a game changer? It's just the first batch that we're seeing. There will be further batches in the Army, the Air Force as well. But when we talk about holistically strengthening of the defense forces in our country, and especially when we have, two open borders, how important is it going to be? How big a game changer will it be?
Well, it's been no secret that we have not allowed our women to come to the forefront in this country. But in the last 10 years or so, this has happened. It's called Nari Shakti, the Prime Minister himself. And therefore, even on the boxing field, in the last few days we've seen. But since I'm from the Navy, and since I'm talking about a parade going on, the Air Marshal and the Banerjee have told you how much good it'll be doing to the country. That these Agniveers, when they come out, well, 25% of them will be in this service, and they will do 17 years of more service, pick up their pension, pick up their medical, etc. they get. The others will be absorbed into the civil field. It will be a great plus for the civil field. They know the equipment that the Army has. They know what the equipment the Air Force has. And therefore, they'll be able to fit in. Because India is becoming an exporter. BrahMos missiles are being exported. Private sector is exporting. And unless a nation begins to export defense, the balance sheet will not balance. But since I'm from the Navy, and we are watching a parade taking place in Chilka, what a lovely evening it must be there. It's a beautiful place in Orissa. And therefore, we must understand the Navy has done something very gradually. When about 15 years ago, the Navy found when they're getting sailors, those who were not very good were sent on small ships. They were not jumped into the Type 15 Rajput and the Vishakhapatnam type of ship, because they'll get completely confused.
Right.
Even a young officer gets confused when he goes on a very modern ship. So they take the good sailors into these big ships, and small went on patrolling the seas, anti-terrorism patrols near the coast, on offshore patrol vessels and this. So I think this is just a transformation, and the Navy will be able to pick up the best out of these Agniveers, 25%. So there's a plus. Of course, there were people arguing all about it, but I have a feeling that once you get the Navy training, it's full of seamanship, boatmanship. On a ship, it runs like a hotel. You cater all the time. You live together all the time. You're out of touch with land, but you're living in a small city. And if you can run a city, you can go back and get any job. So I think it's an absolute plus for the Indian Navy.
Okay.
I want to add something
Sure.
here. See, in terms of what will these people do, Agniveers do after completion of 4 years, there is also a small little clause in all the three forces. These people, after completion of 4 years service, can also take the exam of being officers. There is also a quota of these people to take the exam of being officers. So there will be a small number of people also getting qualified to be officers in the three armed forces.
And then there will be a reservation for them in the central government jobs as well in various ministries.
Besides that, this is besides that.
Okay, AVM, apart from, the entitlements and the avenues, opportunities after their 4-year stint we've spoken about, and since you mentioned the concerns and the controversy that erupted post the Agnipath scheme, let me ask you, the concern still persists, and that is that by the time these young trainees, these young, Agniveers become accustomed to the system, by the time they begin to realize their responsibilities towards the nation, their stint is over. So the question and the argument is, can we have a longer stint? Can we take it from 4 to 6? These are proposals that have, of course, come in with concerns. So how do you look at those responses and concerns?
See, these concerns, I think they are more of fear factors. The concerns will continue. Suppose these guys were not taken into the armed forces, because now we are taking more number of people than what we need actually in the regular cadre. See, we are only retaining 25%, rest are going into the, I would say, into the civil sector. And they are providing the impetus or the booster kind of thing to civil sector if they want to go into defense manufacturing, which relates to Atmanirbharta. If you leave that aside, and if you only want to take regular cadre, there will be as many fewer people. So from that perspective, I don't think we are going to compromise anything, either in the regular armed forces or in the civil sector. We are giving an impetus. But coming to concerns are mostly, I would say, a kind of fear factor. And if you allow me to say, I'm a defense personnel, so normally we don't talk about it. Maybe there's a little bit of national politics involved into it. So if you leave that aside, if you see the scheme in purity, you go to developed countries. We also had short service schemes for officers, who's to come for 5 years, 6 years. And these things are prevalent all over, because by nature of the cadre of armed forces, we need a lot of people at the bottom level. And we don't need as many people on top. So how do you manage that? You need to, let them go out after a certain number of years. We had the middle level people going out, and they always found job. I have not seen, by personal experience, I can tell you, any, PBOR or any kind of officer who left early. If he wanted to work outside, they always had jobs. Jobs were, even in earlier decades, there were no shortage of jobs for the people who wanted to work. But when these young guys go, they are just about, they start 17 and a half, and the maximum age is 23. That means 21 and a half or 27, they are there in the market, which is the normal age for the civilians to start when they do their graduation, post-graduation, look for job, appear for competitions and all that. So they are not losing time. And you have young, trained people who have some kind of seva nidhi with them. There is a fixed amount which is not taxed through the income tax, available with them as a backup. So I think it's doing good for the people who belong to, I would say, lower strata of the society. And you see this parade. I'm seeing after 16 weeks, the way these Agniveers are standing, it's a kind of, toast to the eyes, because they're standing as erect, as good, as lined up as any other person after 1.5 year training would do. So that means the training can go on well. They can do really very well, and there is no problem. So we can always think of pros and cons. But if you really ask me, I always said, even 2 years back or 1.5 years when we were debating, this is a good scheme, good for the nation, good for the young people, good for the private sector, good for the industry, and good for the national security.
Okay.
If we can go through it, we are doing a great job.
Okay, Mr. Banerjee, taking on from what the AVM just said, that maybe, the concerns and the challenges were driven out of national politics. The fact is, they did lead to a lot of protests. We saw many cities and a lot of public property being damaged. The question here is that it did force the government to tweak the system and to make certain changes. So the original Agnipath scheme, which was conceptualized, to what is now being implemented, what are the difference and what are the changes?
Basic difference is that the age profile was changed. It was added a few more years.
Was it just for the first batch, or
so far it is allowed? So one can't say if it is end or no. My only concern in this entire Agnipath is, which I as a journalist feel, and I've written also about it, is that the person, an Agniveer serving in the force, should be given, if he's injured, lifetime medical facility. That is the only thing I think needs to be done, and I believe the government is also working on that. If somebody gets injured during his course of 4 years in the forces, gets a lifetime medical facility. That is the only thing. Abhi, the system is that he gets a lump sum payment, which may not be enough if a person is injured. So a lifetime medical facility with the forces, that I believe the government is working at, and I believe it will happen. Otherwise, the scheme is perfect. You get out from the force after 4 years, and there are multiple options. Really, there are multiple options. People think that I'm talking good. No, there are actually multiple options. Look at the private sector, not just the defense equipment manufacturing sector. Look at the private sector. You need people to manage metros, the metro trains in various cities. You need people to manage various highways. You need educated, IT trained people to manage all this. Where will that force come from? These are the people who will commit. Do it.
But then the question is about acceptability, Commodore. After, having served the defense forces for 4 years, how comfortable will this young force be to serve, the private industry? And then about the payments also, will the private sector be able to accommodate and pay them handsomely so that they are satisfied with what they're doing?
Well, I certainly can speak for the Navy. The amount of technology that you learn in the Indian Navy is something that easily gets absorbed. You will find very few retired officers or sailors from the Navy who are not, because they become specialists. Our cooks are chefs today all over. They're employed in the Taj Mahal Hotel. So there you are, each branch. If you're a navigator, you get into the merchant navy, you get into some position, you're a radar operator. Communications, I'm telling you, signals, communications, and internet of the Indian Navy, they've kept lots, called net-centric warfare. You can definitely. There will always be some tweaking. I like the word you used it, because any scheme that goes through would have tweaking, and I'm sure the Army, the Navy, the Air Force will do their little tweaking, even about the person who gets injured. I'm sure they will look after, and yet we have to know that there will be few who will be disappointed. After 4 years, they'll be told, sorry, old chap. They probably love the Navy, but they say, sorry, old chap, you haven't qualified. So that will have to be taken care of, but they're getting enough money out of the 11 lakhs which are totally promised. Of course, between the cut of what they got, they have a little lump sum. And I'm sure they've been given the confidence to go out, step out in the world, including the women. Get out and step out into the world, because the armed forces gives you one thing, that's confidence about who you are and what you're supposed to do.
AVM, I remember when we were discussing during the protest of the Agniveers scheme, there was one proposal and from a Navy veteran that if such a scheme could be so successful for the defense forces, why not also apply it to the other sectors? So, for example, the government sector, why not into the ministries? Do you think if it's a very, very successful scheme and it actually does a lot of good to the defense forces, it's something that could be replicated in the government sector as well, which also needs to be infused with young and new energy?
See, basically, Tina, you have to understand one thing. There's a huge difference between the texture and the kind of people you need in civil sector or with the government or the private sector, and the kind of people you need in defense forces. The one most important thing is that you have to be very young, agile, and combat worthy. How do you get, and you have to be very, very young. And you need very young people, because they have to go through all the rough and this thing in the early stages when they take on the task of combat duties. This is not the requirement in civil services. This is not the requirement with Government of India. I have worked in both. The requirement here is very, very intense. Therefore, our medical happens each year. We are assessed on air worthiness as an individual, which is called how good are you medically fit for the air duties and how good are you for ground duties. Likewise for Navy. How good are you for sailing duties and how good are you for the offshore duties? So all that combined, there is the requirement which makes us feel that we need to have very young people at the bottom level who are there. But how do you provide them career? You can't provide career to all of them. If you amass your people with so many, there's also another aspect of life that as he grows up and gets his family, gets his children, he wants to live more stable life. He wants to live more, prosperous life. That cannot be provided because the whole cadre is so steep. And secondly, I tell you, which has not come out, everybody tries to compare. Let me tell you mine. In 35 years of my service, I had 28 changes. I lived in 28 houses. So not everyone can tolerate that. Not everyone is, would like to do that. Okay. So there are other sides of the whole thing. That means you need some filtered people to serve armed forces, which are not so great in number. And rest of the people must serve the country in another way. So if you serve the private sector or the public sector or the social sector, you're doing the same kind of great service for the nation.
Exactly, and
So
especially
these
at
guys
this
go,
stage, wherein India is witnessing transformation at such a rapid pace. The fact is that all stakeholders have to put in their energy together in
that's the
various
national
fields.
power. Let me tell you, that's the national power. National
Okay,
power
okay.
is because of all of us.
Okay, AVM, I'll take one last comment from Mr. Banerjee. Yes.
Okay, Tina, this is to answer your question, which you said, why not apply to other sectors also? Please understand the three armed forces are literally the barrel of the gun of the country. The force of the country flows through these armed forces. When the commanding officer of a ship says, okay, boys, this is the task, no questions are asked.
Yes.
The commanding officer of the army says, boys, gun in your hand, bullet BP jacket on your shoulder, get in. The boy has to get in. There is no question asked. So, as AVM Srivastav said, the texture of the men and girls, or men and women who come into these forces has to be different from what the civilian sector needs. It is literally the pointed edge of the spear of the country. So, it has to remain that way.
Absolutely. Okay, so that having been said, we'll have to wind up the program. Time allows me to take up only that much on this edition of Perspective. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on the program today, sharing your thoughts with us and our viewers. And to you viewers, thank you very much for your time as well. I'll see you same time tomorrow now. Take good care of yourselves. Keep watching Sansad TV.